This episode is sponsored by Launch. Are you an insurance agent that is tired of quoting business to try and find a better premium to win new deals? Are you looking for a way to differentiate and stand out from your competition? Well, look no further than Launch. Launch is an industry-leading software platform that gives you pre-built assessments that you can walk through with your prospect. Launch automatically calculates your prospect's risk score, and this allows you to show your prospect the areas you can fix to negotiate better premium and coverage with underwriters. Offer more value to your clients, turn missed sales into closed business, and most of all, become a better advisor to your clients. Visit getlaunch.io today to get more information on how you can use Launch to win more BORs starting right now. That's getlaunch.io to learn more.
Welcome to the Getting Past the Premium podcast, where we focus on breaking down risk management problems bit by bit until we find a solution. If you would like to discuss anything you hear on GPP with us, please reach out using the links in the description. Enjoy today's episode.
All right, well, good to have you back, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome, one Chris. Of our few double up on the episodes guests, right?
It's proximity. I'm easy. I'm here.
You're
I'm close.
Yeah,
we were begging for people to come on, and you were driving by.
Just come on.
I just stopped in to rob the kegerator, and then you guys were set up, so we figured we might as well.
There you go. Why not, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, at the show before the show that we've been going for about an hour here, but why don't you kind of give us an update on what you're doing with Ferro? Because I know you got a lot of cool stuff in the hopper there, and I know your progression to get where you guys are at today has been pretty fun. So can you give everybody an update on what you guys are doing?
Yeah, no, happy to. The last 3 months coming out of Broker Tech Ventures, and then they are kind of get together with BTV Mania, where they bring all of the partners, brokers, insurance companies, and then the cohort class together, and you kind of get to sit down and just, wrap through things in a room just like this and get feedback right away. We got really good feedback coming out of that, and signed up at, 7 to 10, probably closer to 9 kind of POCs coming out of that, which was great. But then, when the rubber meets the road is, hey, like this is going to take some time and effort to evaluate and work through. And so I think we're largely in that phase where I referenced the movie Inception, the dream within a dream, right? Mm-hmm. And it kind of feels like that selling to brokerages sometimes, where you're getting 6, 7, 8 layers in with varying members of leadership and decision and tech and the desk and production and all those different roles, and just getting everybody on the same page and moving in a similar direction, I think is really the challenge with the vast majority of insurtechs. Awesome solutions that you've got to figure out how to deploy as a brokerage, and I think that's the challenge, right? So I think we're largely in that phase where got awesome momentum, awesome traction, and then getting to adoption and utilization feels like we're like right on the edge of the hill, starting to roll downhill, but it just takes time, right? It's just like it's a slow grind when you're trying to distribute through the brokerage. So honestly, it's forced us to kind of step back and say, hey, what other ways can we distribute quicker path to revenue while we allow that brokerage distribution channel to just kind of play out over time? So
totally.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where we're at the moment.
Oh, that's awesome. What in all the conversations you've had and going those layers deep, like what, just in your mind, do you feel like is the reason why it takes that long in insurance brokerages, to implement new tech or really new anything,
Yeah, I think we've all talked about this before, but like at the end of the day, I think you've got especially in the brokerage space, a relatively affluent employee base there, leadership base there, and I think steal a comment from my buddy Chris McIntyre, but the brokerages and leadership, there's no compelling reason to do anything different. You're making great money. You're retaining your clients at a pretty high clip, and so from your perspective, like, why change, right? But I think the reality is there's a groundswell beneath all of that, right? The ground is shifting, whether those folks admit it or not. And I think that's where the opportunity lies, as the boomers kind of age out and younger guys come in with more of a, hey, how do we get more efficient? Where are our dollars going? Tech enabled, how do we take better care of our clients? I think as younger folks, we're really wired that way, right? Like, think about any of your relationships, your wealth manager, anybody who's taking care of you, banking or otherwise, like, your expectation of service is very, very high, and ease of use in transacting and conducting business. And I think insurance just hasn't been forced there yet because customers don't realize that's even an option. But as tech-enabled brokerages come into the space, right, and compete for that competition, they're becoming aware, right? Yep. And as the digital marketplace becomes more available, they're becoming aware that there's a different way. And so as a brokerage, I think that's what's going to be interesting to see over the next handful of years, is how brokerage navigate or make that transition, as they either got to adapt or die, I think, in many respects, because the market's going to shift and kind of force them in that direction. But
do you ever feel, this is something we talk about with launch every now and then that crosses my mind. I mean, I'm also reading a book right now that the guy tried to launch tech too soon, just beat his head against the wall. Like, have you thought about if you're too quick to market with Ferro, where the industry is and their adaptation to tech and, wanting to implement?
I think about the bell curve all the time, right? Behind, right in the middle, perfect timing, or ahead, Most nights that's what I'm laying awake thinking about. But I think it's an interesting thing to consider, though, because, out of those three, before, middle, or ahead, you kind of try and think about, well, where would you rather be? And part of me is I'd rather be leading, right? Like, the way I'm wired, I'm a value-based, technical kind of salesperson, like to educate and help people kind of get to, oh, this is why we do this, right? So for me, I would say to some degree, I feel like we're a little bit ahead almost, which is kind of an oxymoron, because I feel like we're way behind in terms of taking care of our clients, the way that we intend to with Ferro. So it's kind of weird, because it's like, I feel like we're way behind in taking care of clients, but I do feel like in the brokerage space and deploying there, I feel like we might be a little bit ahead in terms of how that all comes together. And we all know that, legacy systems and all that kind of stuff is a big part of what has a big impact. But I'm curious, and you haven't given me a lot of updates, but tell me just, your perspective with launch, your guys' updates, progression there, and how you see it from your side.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that to a degree. Like, the way that I think about it from the insurance agent's perspective is, it's like there's comfortability in the results that have been generated based on what we've always done.
Yeah.
I think that there's probably a lot of reasons for that. Like, we're in the middle of a buyer and the product that they're buying. And so we're kind of reliant on both of those. And so it's easier just to kind of continue down the path than try something new and innovative. Like, there hasn't been enough pain and enough disruption in the industry. Like, and I hate that word to use it, but there isn't enough pain on, your average insurance agency yet to really have to innovate and think about things differently and, think about your tech stack. Like, it's working pretty well still. And it's a lot of work to implement a new solution across your company. Yep. And I think that those short-term thoughts impact a lot of what could be good long-term decisions. Couple that with most agency owners and leaders still have a book of business and clients that they're servicing on a daily basis, and that's where their mind goes first. Yep. It's less about, we're building this business to operate as a business in a lot of regards. It's, I got my book over here, and then I'm going to kind of manage the rest of the business.
Make sure the wheels don't fall off, at least, right?
Yeah, I mean, those are just kind of what I've boiled some of the things down to and thoughts in my brain. But, we're in that. It's the beauty of the insurance industry, because it is relatively stable and you can make a good income and things like that and run a good business. But, I feel like the disruption, the innovation is coming. and those agencies that are thinking about it are going to be positioned well. But I don't know what your perspective on that is, Ryan. But
yeah, I agree. I mean, let me ask you a question first. Do you feel like the disruption is going to come from agencies and brokerages, or do you feel like it's going to come from the end users or the clients of their products and services?
I think it's going to be both, honestly. I think that when I'm out talking to customers, I'm always asking, what's the friction points, right? What's troubling to you? And I think to me, that's part of the difference, right? Is if you're not asking that question, you don't understand what the friction points are, then you're not trying to solve for it. So I think customers are getting more educated, especially as boomers age out and kind of realize, like, you know, hey, it's happened this way for 30 years. Why would anything change, right? It's a known commodity. Like, this is how it happens. As new entrants come into admin side on, and especially insurance and risk management administration on the company side, like, I think those folks are coming in with different set of expectations. So I think it's going to be driven largely by customer base, where they're going to be out looking in the marketplace for someone who helps them transact business better, easier, and more transparent. I think the brokerages will drive it to the extent that they start to see that reality. And I think this is the thing that's kind of sort of the linchpin is, looking at any respective SaaS product as a efficiency play is one thing, right? And hey, it's going to make us more efficient or do more, even, sell more. But I think because it gives us more time, right? But I think the alternative, or the way it should be, considered as well, is, hey, this is a sales and retention opportunity, right? And I think that's where it kind of misses the boat for me sometimes, is if as a brokerage we're thinking about how do we 10x our growth, right? Well, we can do the traditional, guys like us out on the street knocking on doors and doing it that way. But when I'm one of 10 guys knocking on the door with the same story, it just makes it tough. When I can go in and talk about, hey, here's all the friction points I'm guessing you already feel, yes, no, customer. And they're like, yeah. Mm-hmm. Hey, guess what? We've already addressed them. Does that sound good to you? Yeah, I think that's going to all start to kind of come together. I just don't know that it's going to come together in, as a startup, the timeline you hope it comes together. And so we often think about and talk about, runway and how do we give ourselves enough time to do the good things we want to be able to do. So
what makes me a little bit comfortable around where we're at with launch in particular is that we, at least we're betting to a certain extent that the client base, that the end user is going to drive the change. Mm-hmm. And we're not relying so much on the industry to shift.
Yep.
Like, the industry is going to start looking for solutions when their clients come in and they're like, we have all these different risks that you're not addressing.
Yep.
I was looking at a couple of different studies by McKinsey & Co. and whatnot, and I think even, there's another big company that does surveys, and they're ranking the top 10 business risks over the years and watching that shift. And you start going down the list, and you're like, well, so what could we actually finance? And, what risk could we get off of our balance sheet by outsourcing it in one way or another? And there's not a lot. Really, mm-hmm. There's all the traditional methods that you and I are very familiar with, but then there's all this other stuff that you ultimately have to build some sort of resiliency to, mm-hmm. and you have to have a game plan, not for a specific risk, but how you're going to deal with the uncertainties and being strong enough to do that. And that's going to take a coach, not an insurance guy.
Yep.
an advisor and not an insurance guy. And the more that these companies go through things like the pandemic and active shooter scenarios and all the different crap that you could think of that could possibly happen on a day-to-day basis, like, it's going to be the end user that's going to walk into their insurance agent and say, hey, can you guys do this? Because this other guy's banging on my door like they can. And when that voice gets loud enough, there's going to be sheer panic for all these guys that are sitting on their wallets thinking that they got, all the PE firms have been like, you guys are phenomenal. We'll pay you 20x.
Yeah.
And da-da-da-da-da-da. It's not going to be the case.
All of a sudden, retention numbers drop from 95 to 85, and there's going to be some head scratching going on, right?
Yeah, because I firmly feel like all these other businesses are having to be really dynamic and change.
Yep.
And like, we're not.
Yep.
We don't have to. We don't feel like we have to.
Well, you think about your progression of dynamic, right? Dynamic for us as brokerages was, hey, we're going to build a really refined sales and service structure. For you guys, that's Encore. For us, that's Ascent, right? That was, and rightfully so. Like, it was all good, appropriate, awesome stuff. It's made our business so much better, and I assume the same for you guys. But that was the pinnacle of, well, within our context, that's all we can do, right? And I think that's that shift like you're talking about, where we have to go where the market tells us to go. Because if we wanted to compete, thinking about our internal programs, right, Ascent, Encore, like, you think about those internal programs, that was our differentiator in the marketplace, right? Because we're out, somebody's talking to them about a refined process. We already did all that, but then we needed to put a name to it so we could meet that. Well, here's our refined process, right? And I think that progression is just interesting of what dynamic is or means, because I think that started with process to some degree and being able to walk your clients through that. But I think it's going to, like you said, it's going to progress to where clients are saying, okay, well, you guys helped me there. That's great. What's the next thing that you can make better for me, right? And if you have digitally enabled brokerages coming in and competing for business and you're losing a percentage point or two on your retention numbers year over year, you're going to start looking at, hey, okay, we got to figure out what does that next progression of dynamic mean for our brokerage, I think. Interesting.
I think if you look at other industries as well, it's becoming more apparent too. I mean, look at how many CPA firms are getting into wealth management. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's one here in Omaha, wealth management, accounting, they have tech services, MSPs, they have a talent division.
Talent, yep.
So, like, you're seeing it in all these other industries as well, where you're going, okay, we have trusted advisor relationships that we can leverage, right? So I think, but the end user is going to start to expect that from their advisors, right? What, like you said, what else can you help me with? If I'm paying you, $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 a year, whatever the number is, they're going to start to question that a little bit more and question the value that they're getting out of it. 100%. And there's one thing, with insurance, that we sell a product that, you may never use, which hopefully you don't have to ever use. But a lot of times that's very hard for a client to see the value of you in that scenario, and because they may never use it. And so every year you're telling me that you got to talk to me about how my price is going up and, whatever it is, and I'm never going to use it. So what's the value? And so I think it's that is to, I think, what Ryan's point there is, the end user, when they start to see that in every other facet of their business, these people are showing incredible value. And then there's the insurance agents they're going to start to question, and that will be a shift. That is where I think we will start to see a lot of it. But it also presents an opportunity, for those that want to start to think differently about how I can solve more problems for my client. And it doesn't have to be big and revolutionary. That's the other thing that I think we sometimes think, our minds go to that, like innovative is some massive new thing. Like, it's not at all. It's just consistently showing your clients a little bit more value.
Yep.
That's innovation.
Yep. 100%.
So it could be, we were talking about this earlier, we could probably revolutionize a lot of what our agencies do from a client interaction perspective with like landing pages and stuff, and like, hey, if you need a vehicle change, just go here, pop it in, and it sends it to us, and it's all done. Then you layer on like a Ferro or a Launch or other truly tech-enabled platforms, and you can do a lot of stuff to solve those problems for your clients. But I do think that the shift is going to occur, whether it's end user making that shift or whether it's the industry making the shift. I think we're going to start to see it. I think there could be regulatory forces that make that happen too. You've seen it in the financial services arena to a degree. Even that side of the industry hasn't fully made the switch, but it's certainly a large chunk of the industry is going to more advisory services, right?
Yeah, for sure. So on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, I also don't believe that, the best risk advisory team can come in and advise on every risk, right? So, because you've got risks that range from huge macro, like, nuclear war, climate change, some of these things that you can connect the dots down to small companies and how that is impactful. But, people start to run out of solutions fairly quickly. And, they have a hard time connecting the dots, specifically when we're sitting here in the middle of Nebraska and the typical clients maybe got 50 employees and an advisor wants to come and start talking to you about climate change. But on the same side of it, you have little small day-to-day risks that are also kind of difficult to manage around. So like as an advisor, where and how do you come into a business and start to pick apart where you're going to advise and where you're not, and draw the lines and add the value in the right places, regardless of product and how you get paid and everything else? How are you going to do that, and where are you going to settle in? I think is equally as important as saying that we're going to be more than just a product guy. Yeah. And I don't know, I've been thinking about it a lot and honestly struggling a little bit with it just because it can get so big so fast.
It can get big, and I think the challenge there, I think about that, the parallels with a tech company to what you just described, right? Where are you going to start? Where are you going to go, right? Well, in tech, you're like, well, we're going to follow what the customers tell us, right? Like, we're going to build it to spec, like, let the market dictate it. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting because my initial reaction is like, well, that's what I do with my P&C clients, right? I'm like, hey, tell me what matters to you. We'll start there. Mm-hmm. But then you layer in our E&O exposure, and it's like, what am I not talking to you about that you're not ready to hear, but I'm going to make you be ready to hear because I at least have to, like that's an interesting.
It can't be just reactionary.
Yeah, like there's got to be and that's where like something like Launch comes in, and at least I think does a really good job of setting that basis of, hey, we checked a lot of boxes. It's great for, for a brokerage from that perspective. But point being is it helps you work with that customer to establish what's important to them, and for you to establish with them what's important to you for them or on their behalf. But yeah, it's interesting. I think the opportunity brokerages have to bring solutions out, there's a fiduciary responsibility there, right? For us as an advisor, as a consultant, to put, even if it's a small, moves the needle a little bit, but it's just that something to help them. I think we have a responsibility to not rest on our laurels and actually step out and promote, good things on their behalf over time. It just takes time.
Yeah. So I want to, with all of that thought process in mind, since we have you here, if you were starting your own brokerage today, what would your tech stack look like, trying to achieve everything that we've just been discussing? With all of that in mind, how would you design it to give your client the best experience, to give them the best advice, to be the fiduciary, all those things? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's, we use this kind of analogy, I guess, for Ferro, where in our perspective, the industry is inverted to a degree. And so the example there is an upside down house. The foundation is the insurance company at the top in the upside down house, flowing through us at the brokerage and ultimately to the end user, the policyholder. Our perspective is The correct way that should flow is using the policyholder as the foundation of the house, flowing up through the brokerage, that information, data, and ultimately to the insurance company. That's maybe a really rough analogy, but I use it to say, if I were thinking about building a brokerage, what do? We take care of customers. That's what we do. So everything I would do with a tech stack would be ultimately and foremost designed to address my customer as good as I possibly could. And I would build up from there. And so you think about, we talk about legacy systems, AMS systems, okay, but how do we still run our brokerage, right? Well, right now, we run our brokerage on a system that's, to a large degree, not connected to our customer. It holds some of our customer information, but it's not connected, right? So I think about it and I'm like, gosh, for us to have a really fully integrated brokerage where we can use data really well, get to it, process it, make key decisions as a brokerage, key decisions with our customers, is how do we get connected to our customers and get our information connected to our customers better than we ever have before. And then I would just build up from there. So I think, an example of that is, getting on a AMS system that can actually provide a truly integrated and engaging customer platform that flows directly into our AMS system. I think that would be my starting point. And then I would just be thinking about how I layer in additional tech to support it, because I think that's where it's going. I think anybody I talk to today, the reality is the cream of the crop on one point, InsurTech solutions are going to rise to the surface, and then they're going to have to figure out how to be partners with one another so that we can layer in. Think about a brokerage tech stack. Think about your client tech stack, right? Like to me, those are kind of two things with some crossover, right? Because they should be able to work together. That's where my head goes, is really just thinking about it, building it from the policyholder up, and just layering it in over time. And it can't all happen at once, right? But I think those brokerages who figure out how to use data well, man, they're going to be light years ahead. Think about all the things you can do with digital data, right? To inform buying decisions, to make sure, kind of layering it back then to launch, right? Launch, we use, new business and renewal business. It can be used both, right? But you think about it, for those customers who you've had for a decade, how do we get access to the data to show them that, hey, other companies of your size are carrying a $5 million umbrella, you're at $2 million. Or other companies of your size only have cyber and you don't. Or other companies of your size have a distracted driving policy and you don't. How do we get access to that information so we can feed it back to them and be better advisors as a result and help them be, better secured customers? That's where I'd start. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I think too, you were talking about the client's tech stack too, and it made me think I don't remember the podcast I was listening to. I'm going to butcher the statistic, but it blew me away. Because it was I think it was 15 years ago. There's just a study released that 15 years ago, the average, I can't remember if they were an insurance agency or just average business, had 8 different software systems across everything they were doing. Now it's 114 or something like that. Different software applications that you're using to some degree in your business. That blew me away. I would have guessed
wild.
30.
That's a huge number.
I feel it every time Elliot walks into my office and wants me to start logging into another program.
Yeah.
Well, think about it though.
True.
That's a staggering
just
number.
in Microsoft Office, you've got probably 10 to 15 that you end up using. Yeah, and it's just, and it adds up. And I think that, though, thinking about that from your client's perspective was interesting when you said that. What's the client's tech stack? How do we fit in? How can we make it simple?
Yeah. Well, and you think about the friction points. I would think we could all agree, the biggest friction points for customers outside of a claim, let's say, right? Claims are always that becomes priority. But outside of that, it's renewal, schedule management, applications. Oftentimes they're just okay, if I don't have a claim, this is just my biggest thing that annoys me, right? In the course of a policy term. Oh, and certificates and auto ID cards, maybe layer in some of those. There's solutions out there that answer all of those today. It's just the path to getting them to a customer in a kind of cohesive, single sign-on sort of environment, still tough. But I think it's going to get there, and as soon as you can, then think about how efficient you get at the brokerage too. If you got a client who's self-managing on their certificates, and only flagging the ones that they can't handle up to you to kind of deal with. I think it's interesting. I was going to mention, have you guys heard of? I'm going to give a plug here. Have you heard of borrowed time?
Huh.
So a buddy of mine in Ohio works for a brokerage, and they developed their own AMS system in Salesforce. And then what they're doing with borrowed time is just creating essentially like a country club membership for the code base to that Salesforce AMS system that they built. I use it as an example. The plug is more about the philosophy behind it. To me, that makes so much sense because it's how do we as an industry ever we're talking about micro changes, right? How do we get to a point where there's a macro change? And I think it's that collaboration, partnering, sharing ideas, and bringing things together. So it's not 114. It's how do we bring these together to 10,
it acts
10.
Like 10.
Yeah, right.
Maybe it's 114, but acts like 10.
It acts like 10. It's manageable. Yeah, I think that's the thing. And I think that is interesting. Like the 114 to me underscores the challenge of that really shows everyone trying to work around the limitations of an AMS system.
To 100% is. And anymore, you think about with the individualized tools that are out there, like certificate tools, you start to layer in even a few of those, and you start to realize how little you potentially need the AMS. I'm not saying that AMSs are a bad thing in the aggregate, but I mean that depending on how you want to operate as an agency, you could minimize the function of your AMS pretty small.
Oh, yeah.
And so then the amount of mind share that AMSs get in this conversation, because everything is centered around, to your point, it's built off of, is I feel like it causes there to be less innovation, less movement forward, because it's like, well, if it doesn't integrate with my AMS, we probably can't do it.
100%.
And I will say that, I've been a opponent of some of the major AMS systems for the lack of innovation. I think they're doing some good things.
Yeah,
I think they're seeing that this is where the industry is going, and that they're going to have to shift to. It's just shifting the Titanic, but they've got a lot of resources too. I mean, some of the things like Applied is doing with Ivans, I think is going to be really cool. And so it's that balance of trying to figure out where do we sit today, but how can we find the best tool for our application of the client, and not allowing ourselves just to be caught in that, hey, if my AMS can't do it, we can't do it. We were having this discussion the other day on how many emails we attach.
Oh, man.
And we're like, how many email archiving tools are out there? We need
do
to be
it for
able
you
to
automatically.
Yeah, we need to be able to find the information, which typically is in an activity where we're taking a note on it somewhere. Chris called to change his vehicle to this. I don't necessarily need to know the email that was sent in. And then we need to know it from an E&O perspective. So if we can just archive all of those, so I can go in and search Chris Senkbile, and it'll pull up all your emails, and I can set a vehicle change on top of it, and they're out there that do it and do it automatically.
I was going to say, I got a list of those that I need to call because we need to get partnered up. Speaking of partnering.
I got 2 demos scheduled, by the way.
Yeah.
There you go.
We started to look at it, and we're like, holy crap, that's probably, I don't know what our director of ops was doing the math on. It's probably 30 to 40% of an individual's time when you figure out just attaching emails.
Yep.
And for, at the end of the day, situations are very real. I'm not going to downplay that at all. But I feel like they, again, they cause us to overthink a lot of this.
Yeah, there's some perception that they got to get attached into this godly system. And it's like, no, they don't.
No.
It provides no value.
And what I guess I was getting at is an agency might go through 1, 2, 3, however many E&O claims over the course of a career. Mm-hmm. Not good. Again, you want to have all the documentation, everything done. But to spend 30 or 40% of your time attaching every single email that comes in, why don't we just have them in a database that we got to go search and spend a bunch of time when the claim happens? Yeah. They're all there.
Yeah.
We're still doing everything the same for the client. Yeah. We're still all of that. It's just it's been on our mind lately because we were like, holy crap, this is probably solved pretty easily. And we've just never really put us. Yeah. We've never put a second thought to it. It's like, this is how Epic attaches emails.
Yeah. Oh, same boat.
You know?
Same boat. I think that's the, even something like that, all the onus is on us at the brokerage, right? Just by virtue of the fact that we play this middleman kind of position, right? And we've got to keep track of it all. Even stuff like that, I do think, like, just as an example with Ferro, like, thinking about it is a foundational tool, right? Customer is the foundation. If we could get to a point where everything is emanating out of a tool like that, so it's the customer's platform, they can email in and out of it, they could call out of it, right? And then we're tracking and attaching and keeping track of everything at that level as well that we have access to. It's a collaborative platform, right? We also have access to it. My mind kind of spins on just the impact on E&O over time with that approach, with that self-managed, right? Like, that's the kind of the buzzword, is that more kind of self-managed approach. And I think there's something to that, because you think about, like, the balancing act. So let's take that forward, right? Self-managed. Like, you think about the balancing act of how other industries have progressed with that over time. And, like, I know for myself, I prefer to do most things myself as a customer. I want to bring in the consultant or advisor, to help coach me up, make sure I'm not doing it. But I want to, like, kind of make sure I've got my stuff together personally. And that's just the way I'm wired. But I think part of it is also my generation and, like, how we engage with the world is, like, I'm going to do a lot of this as much as I can myself and pulling. So I think it's just interesting to think about that reality and how that is going to grow or not grow into P&C space or other spaces too, is, what's realistic and, like, what is that right balance, right, of how much they're doing versus how much we're doing. Obviously, we have to continue always to, like, maintain that information in our systems as well. But I think that's the cool thing, or the idea around a collaborative tool, or a tool that actually connects at the customer and broker level, is now you've got a cross-reference too, right? Like, you've got other ways in an E&O scenario to kind of check and see, what transpired.
Well, what's funny to me is, like, so we use Pipedrive as our CRM. Super simple CRM, by the way. Like, nothing fancy. It's not expensive, but it does a lot of cool stuff. And you can connect your email in there. And so then you just go to an organization or a client in there, and it'll have in sequence every email and every note I put on the client, right? And I'm just thinking, like, in the AMS, we have to go, if I have a conversation with you, if I want to take a note on that, I have to go open up an activity.
Yes.
I have to select the type of activity that this vehicle change. I have to select change request. I have to select this. I have to select, then I can take my note. Then I have to go attach the email that, or whatever it was.
It's like 15 steps to the process.
It's all there, and it's way easier for me to then go see my correspondence with the client. Because in that change request, you might have sent me an email, said, hey, I got to update a vehicle. Will you give me a call? Attach that. I can call you, get all the information, put all that in, and, like, then it's in two separate spots. It's just, the whole thing could be rethought. I think that, again, it's kind of the cool way that we're in this. You and I do this all the time, where it's like, we can do this and we can do that.
Oh, man.
It's there,
That is the good news about, like, to your point, though, larger AMS systems, like, they're starting to grapple with the reality of how do we engage. There's a lot of pressure on them, and I'm excited, man. Like, I'm excited to see where it all goes, because I think as soon as we're able to start using data better in this industry, there's a lot of really cool things that can happen for those brokerages who engage that well, and just impact overall growth and sales. Like, that's how we live, right? So,
totally agree. Yeah, I think that the legacy AMSs are in a really good position if they can get it figured out, and they got a lot of capital, at the end of the day. And I would have told you if you'd asked me,
capital.
If you had asked me 18 months, 24 months ago, I was so ready to leave Applied and just, there's better ways to do it and all this, had one lined up, and we just decided to wait. And now I'm kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of want to see where this goes a little bit.
Yeah.
And solve some of our big issues that we've got with them, like the email management and things like that. But I kind of want to see where they get it. Because, again, like, they've got, like, an Ivans is just the best example with Applied. Like, that is in so many different things that you think about pulling that out. And it's like, whew. Now, they could also do something really cool with it. I think they're trying.
I think leadership there is
Yeah.
starting to really try and wrap their heads around it. That's my perspective. So I give them the benefit of the doubt on that for sure. I think that's tough, man. You think about being that size of organization, what your core business is, and then trying to shift. It's Jim Collins, right? Good to Great. Like trying to shift your core business model. Like the company who does that and can do it and do it well, they're going to win.
Yeah.
Company who doesn't is going to lose. But there's a major risk to it. Major risk to it. So tell me this. What do you think the Huskers' record is going to be this year?
Jeez.
You think we're going to get 6 wins?
Judging by Frost's opening statement at Big Ten Media Days, which
Silence?
wasn't one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
I think if we can't get to 6 wins this year, they all deserve to be fired because it's a schedule set up for it. He brought in all these new coaches. It's just like, you have to.
Yeah.
Come on.
6 wins feels like it should be, a gimme. Like
I agree.
If you get 6, that feels like that should be like the baseline.
Yeah.
Like if
It's
you
minimum
don't,
to keep your job.
that's the bare minimum to keep your job.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just hope they can get 6 wins.
Yeah.
Maybe win 1 or 2 that they weren't expected to.
Well, we'll take that win over Oklahoma and Kylie.
Yeah.
Kylie Hubbard comes
Yeah.
up. See if she's listening.
Yeah, Kylie. Sorry, but it's not looking good when you come to town.
We'll have fun.
I wish we
do
could actually
love the-
mean that.
I was going to say, I love the optimism that we
Typical
all
Husker
seem
fan.
to gain about right now. And
We all hate
We've
our
been
lives in
burned by it.
October, but then, every August rolls around and we're like, here we go.
We're the best in the country. Natty on the docks for us.
We're literally, we were having conversations with each other last year on Saturdays after we would just get our asses kicked. Like, why do we put ourselves through this?
Yeah.
We get so wrapped up and it kills the weekend. And
Somebody
they gotta stop. They gotta start winning, or I gotta start caring less.
Yeah.
One of the two.
I was gonna say somebody outside of Nebraska. I think their answer would be, "Well, you have nothing else to do on the weekend than
Yeah.
care about the Huskers." Which
That's right. That's
partly
right.
they're not wrong. So maybe we just
Can't
need to
blame them.
diversify our interests a little bit
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
All right,
man.
dude. Well,
Good
yeah.
chatting with you.
Like
That was fun.
Yeah.
Always good. We'll do it again.
Sounds
Later.
like a plan.
Thank you for tuning in to Getting Past the Premium. We are excited to continue breaking down barriers and finding solutions together. If you would like to reach out regarding anything you heard in today's episode, find links and contact info in the description. Until next time, have a great day, and let's continue getting past the premium.